The darkness swallows everything, every sound, every breath, every hope. And in that darkness you wait, not for rescue, not for mercy, but for judgment. Because in the world of the Vikings, judgment didn't come from courts or kings. It came from pain, from fire, from water, from the earth itself. And if you were a shield maiden, you faced it alone. Imagine standing in a longhouse surrounded by faces carved from stone and shadow. The air is thick with smoke and tension. Every warrior, every elder, every soul in that hall is watching you. Waiting, because you've been accused. Maybe it's theft, maybe it's betrayal, maybe it's something worse. But the accusation doesn't matter as much as what comes next, because there are no lawyers here, no witnesses to call, no evidence to present, only the trial, the ordeal. The ritual that will decide if you live with honor or die in shame. Your hands are bound, not with rope, but with expectation. Your fate is sealed, not by men, but by the gods. And the only way out is through fire, through agony, through a test designed not just to measure your guilt, but to strip away every layer of pretense until only truth remains. So let me ask you something. If everything you were, your name, your legacy, your very soul, depended on surviving impossible pain, would you step forward, or would you run? Because the shield maidens didn't run, they never ran, they walked into the fire. And what happened next changed them forever. But before we talk about the trials themselves, we need to understand who these women really were. Not the Hollywood version, not the fantasy, but the flesh and blood warriors who carved their names into a world that wanted to erase them. A shield maiden wasn't chosen by fate. She chose herself. In a society where most women were expected to manage households, raise children, and maintain the domestic order, some refused. Some looked at the world of men, of battle, of glory, of freedom, and decided they wanted it too. But wanting it wasn't enough. You had to prove it. You had to become it. And that transformation, that required sacrifice. Not the kind you read about in poems, but the kind that leaves scars. The kind that changes your bones. The kind that makes you unrecognizable to the person you used to be. From childhood, these girls trained differently. While others learned to weave and cook, they learned to fight. They held wooden swords until their hands bled. They ran until their lungs burned. They wrestled with boys twice their size and learned that losing meant getting better. But physical training was only part of it. The real transformation happened inside, because to become a shield maiden meant rejecting the protection that came with being a woman. It meant accepting that you would be judged by the same brutal standards as any warrior. It meant understanding that if you failed, no one would save you, and that acceptance, that willingness to stand alone, that was the first ritual, the ritual of choice, the moment you decided that safety was a cage, and freedom was worth dying for. But once that choice was made, there was no going back. In the flickering light of sacred fires, in groves hidden from the eyes of the unworthy, a ceremony would take place. The oath of the Valkyrie. Not every shield maiden spoke of it, not every saga recorded it, but the whispers remained. Whispers of a moment when the girl died and the warrior was born. She would stand before witnesses, other shield maidens perhaps, or a Verlva, a seer who could read the threads of fate. A blade would be presented, sharp, clean, purposeful. The girl would take it, and without hesitation she would draw it across her own palm. Blood would well up, dark and honest. It would drip onto the earth, onto stone, onto whatever sacred ground held the ceremony. This wasn't symbolic, this was binding. The blood was an offering to the gods, to Odin, to Freyja, to the Norns who wove destiny itself. And with that offering came words, words that could never be taken back. She would swear to walk the warrior's path, to accept battle as her home, to seek honor above comfort, to face judgment, divine or mortal, without flinching, to die if necessary with a sword in her hand and her name intact. These weren't empty promises, they were law. From that moment forward, she was no longer protected by the social rules that shielded other women. She couldn't claim ignorance. She couldn't plead weakness. She stood equal to men in expectation. And in punishment, if she committed a crime, she faced the same consequences. If she broke an oath, she faced the same trials. If she was accused, she faced the same ordeals. And those ordeals were designed to destroy the guilty and test the innocent to their absolute limits. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about what it really meant to prove your innocence when innocence was measured in burns and scars. The first trial, the one that haunts every description, every saga, every nightmare, was the ordeal of hot iron. Picture this. The longhouse is packed. Every member of the community is present because this isn't just about you. It's about order. It's about proving that the gods still watch. That truth still matters, that the invisible bonds holding society together are real. In the center of the hall, a forge burns, not the kind used for making tools. This fire is sacred, blessed, prepared specifically for judgment. A piece of iron, usually a rod or a plowshare, is placed into the flames. It sits there, heating, glowing, transforming from dull metal into something that looks alive. Red, then orange, then white at the edges. The heat radiates outward in waves you can feel from across the room. Your skin prickles, your throat goes dry, and you know. You know that soon you'll have to touch it. A priest or chieftain oversees the ritual. Prayers are spoken, words in the old tongue, calling on the gods to reveal truth. Then the iron is removed from the fire, it's placed on the ground, and you are told to pick it up. Not quickly, not for a brief second. You must carry it. 9 steps. 9 deliberate, measured steps, each one witnessed, each one counted, each one an eternity. You step forward. The heat hits you before you're even close. Your body screams at you to stop, to run, to do anything but continue. But you can't, because stopping means guilt, hesitation means doubt, and doubt. Doubt is the same as confession, so you reach down, your fingers close around the iron, and the pain. The pain is beyond description. It's not like touching something hot, it's like your hand is being unmade, like every nerve is on fire, like your bones are melting from the inside out. But you don't let go, you lift it, and you take the first step. 1, your vision blurs. 2, your breath comes in ragged gasps. 3, you can smell your own flesh burning. 4, your mind starts to fracture. 5, you wonder if you'll die before you finish. 6, everything narrows to this moment. 7, you can't feel your hand anymore, only pain. 8, you're not sure if you're still standing. 9, you release the iron, it falls, you fall, and then silence, your hand is wrapped in clean linen. You're taken away. And now begins the waiting. 3 days. 3 days to see if your wounds heal cleanly or fester with infection. 3 days to learn if the gods have declared you innocent or condemned you as guilty. If your hand heals, if the burns close without rot, without corruption, then you are vindicated. The community accepts you. Your honor is restored, but if the wounds fester, if infection sets in, then the gods have spoken. You are guilty, and the punishment is swift. Exile, execution, or worse, public shame so complete that you become nothing, a person without honor, someone whose name is cursed and forgotten. In a culture where your reputation was your only true wealth. That was a fate worse than death, but fire wasn't the only test. There was another ordeal, equally brutal, equally unforgiving, the ordeal of boiling water. A massive cauldron is brought into the hall. It's filled with water and set over a fire until the surface roils and bubbles violently. Steam rises in thick clouds, filling the room with heat and moisture. At the bottom of the cauldron, a stone is placed. Sometimes it's marked, sometimes it's blessed, sometimes it's just a stone, but it represents truth. And you have to retrieve it. The rules are simple. You plunge your hand, or sometimes your entire arm, into the boiling water. You reach down through the scalding liquid. You find the stone, you pull it out, and then, just like with the iron, you wait 3 days, 3 days to see if your skin heals or rots. But here's what makes this trial even more insidious. With the iron, the pain is immediate and obvious. You know what you're getting into, but with the water, there's a moment of deception. The steam rises, the surface bubbles, and for just a second your mind tries to convince you that maybe it's not that hot. Maybe you can do this quickly, maybe it won't be so bad. But the moment your hand breaks the surface, the moment the water closes around your skin, you realize the truth. It's worse, because water conducts heat differently than metal. It surrounds you, it clings to you, it finds every inch of exposed skin and burns it all at once. And you can't just touch it and pull away, you have to reach deep. You have to submerge your arm up to the elbow, sometimes higher. You have to feel the water boil against your flesh while you search blindly for the stone. Your nerves scream, your muscles seize, your body tries to override your will and pull your arm out. But you can't, because pulling out without the stone means guilt, so you force yourself deeper. Your fingers brush the bottom of the cauldron, you search frantically. Every second feels like an hour. Finally, you touch it, the stone, you grab it. And you pull your arm out. The skin is already blistering. Red, raw, destroyed, but you hold the stone high. You've completed the ordeal. Now, you wait and pray that the gods will show mercy. But perhaps the most terrifying ordeal of all was the one that involved no fire, no heat, only cold, the ordeal of water, the trial of the fjord. In the frozen north, water was sacred. It was the boundary between worlds, the pathway to the afterlife, the realm of spirits and gods, and it was believed that water could not lie if you were guilty. The water would reject you. You would float, buoyant, visible, condemned. But if you were innocent, the water would accept you. You would sink, down into the cold, down into the darkness, down into the arms of truth itself. The ritual was simple in concept. Horrifying in execution, you were brought to the edge of a fjord or a deep lake. Your hands were bound, sometimes your feet as well. Prayers were spoken, witnesses gathered. And then you were pushed. The cold hits like a physical blow, not gradually, not gently, but all at once like being struck by a hammer made of ice. Your lungs seize, your heart stutters, your body goes into immediate shock, and you start to sink if you're innocent, if the gods accept you. If the water pulls you down into its depths, but here's the nightmare. You don't know how long you'll be under, you don't know if they'll pull you out in time. You don't know if innocence means drowning, because the people on shore, they're watching, counting, waiting to see if you sink or float, and if you sink, they'll eventually pull you out. Eventually. But how long is eventually? How long can you hold your breath while freezing water crushes your chest and darkness swallows your vision? How long before your lungs give out and you inhale water instead of air? How long before innocence becomes indistinguishable from death? You sink deeper, the light above fades, your ears fill with pressure, your body screams for air, and you have to trust. Trust that they're watching, trust that they'll pull you up. Trust that proving your innocence won't cost you your life, but trust. Trust is hard when you're drowning, when every instinct tells you to fight, to struggle, to kick for the surface. But struggling might make you float, and floating means guilt, so you force yourself to stay still, to sink, to let the water take you, and you pray that the hands reaching down to save you reach you in time. These ordeals weren't rare. They weren't reserved for extreme cases. They were woven into the fabric of Viking society. Any serious accusation could trigger one: theft, adultery, betrayal, murder, sorcery. And for Shield-Maidens, the stakes were even higher because they had chosen to live by the warrior's code. They had sworn oaths. They had claimed equality with men, and that meant facing the same consequences. No special treatment, no mercy based on gender. If a Shield-Maiden was accused, she faced the ordeal just like any warrior would. And if she failed, her name was erased, her deeds forgotten, her legacy destroyed. But here's something most people don't realize. These women weren't just victims of the system. They were enforcers, participants, believers. They stood at these trials and watched others endure what they might one day face. They held the accused accountable. They witnessed the ordeals. They helped interpret the results because they understood something crucial. These rituals weren't just about punishment. They were about maintaining order in a world constantly on the edge of chaos. In a society built on raiding, warfare, and expansion. Trust was everything. You had to know that your shield brother wouldn't betray you in battle, that your chieftain wouldn't sell you out for silver, that your community would stand together when enemies came. And the only way to maintain that trust was to have a system that everyone believed in, a system where truth could be proven, where lies were exposed, where the gods themselves participated in justice. The ordeals provided that. They weren't perfect. They weren't fair by modern standards, but they created something powerful, a shared belief that truth mattered, that honor was real, that the universe itself cared about right and wrong. And for Shield-Maidens, upholding that system was part of their duty. They had chosen to be warriors, to be protectors, to be the ones who stood between order and chaos. So when someone was accused, they didn't look away, they didn't protest the brutality. They watched, they bore witness. They ensured the ritual was performed correctly, because they knew that one day it might be them standing in the center of that hall, them reaching for the burning iron, them sinking into the freezing water. And when that day came, they would want the same thing they demanded of others: truth, no matter the cost, but living with this knowledge. Living every day knowing that your innocence might one day need to be proven through agony. That did something to a person. It created a psychological pressure that modern minds can barely comprehend. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that a single accusation could destroy everything. That someone with a grudge could point a finger and suddenly you're standing before the community preparing to burn. There was no presumption of innocence, no investigation, no time to prepare a defense, just the accusation. And the ordeal. This created a culture of extreme caution. People guarded their reputations fiercely. They avoided even the appearance of wrongdoing. They cultivated witnesses to their good character, because once accused, your fate was in the hands of the gods, and the gods spoke through pain. For Shield-Maidens, this pressure was even more intense. They had rejected the traditional protections of their gender. They had claimed the right to fight, to lead, to make decisions, and with those rights came responsibilities if they failed. If they showed weakness, if they were accused and couldn't endure the ordeal, it didn't just destroy them. It undermined every other woman who had chosen the warrior's path. It gave ammunition to those who said women didn't belong in battle, that they were too weak, too emotional, too unreliable. So shield maidens carried a double burden. They had to prove themselves in combat, and they had to prove themselves worthy of the warrior's code. Every single day, one mistake could end everything. One accusation could force them into an ordeal that would test not just their innocence, but their very right to exist as warriors. And yet, they endured. They trained their bodies to withstand pain. They trained their minds to accept suffering. They cultivated a kind of psychological armor that allowed them to face the possibility of these ordeals without breaking. Because breaking, that wasn't an option. Some of them developed rituals of their own, private practices to prepare for the possibility of trial. They would hold their hands over flames, building tolerance to heat. They would plunge their arms into cold water, training their bodies not to panic. They would practice holding their breath, preparing for the possibility of drowning, not because they expected to be accused, but because being prepared. That was the only control they had, and in a world where so much was beyond control, where fate and the gods decided outcomes, where a single moment could determine your entire legacy. That small measure of control mattered. It meant the difference between facing the ordeal with dignity or facing it with terror, and dignity mattered because even if you died in the ordeal, even if the gods declared you guilty, even if your name was cursed and forgotten, how you faced it, that was yours. That was the one thing no one could take. So when the moment came, when the accusation was made and the ordeal prepared, a shield maiden would step forward, not with joy, not with confidence, but with acceptance. She would look at the burning iron or the boiling water or the freezing fjord, and she would understand. This was the price of choosing the warrior's path, the price of claiming honor, the price of living in a world where truth was measured in scars, and she would pay it, not because she wanted to, but because refusing. That would be worse, because refusing meant admitting doubt, admitting guilt, admitting that maybe she didn't belong after all. So she would reach out, she would grasp the iron, she would plunge her hand into the boiling water, she would sink into the freezing depths, and she would endure, because endurance, that was the one skill that mattered more than strength, more than speed, more than cunning. The ability to suffer and not break, to face impossible pain and come out the other side, to let the gods judge you and accept their verdict. That was what separated the worthy from the weak. And shield maidens, they were anything but weak. Now, here's the question we have to ask. Looking back from our modern perspective, with our concepts of human rights and due process and innocent until proven guilty, these ordeals seem barbaric, cruel, unjust, and maybe they were, but they also created something we've lost, a society where people believed in absolute truth, where honor wasn't just a word but a living force, where community bonds were strong enough to survive anything because everyone trusted the system that held them together. We don't have that anymore. We have trials that can be manipulated, evidence that can be fabricated, lawyers who win cases regardless of truth. We have a system that prioritizes process over outcome. That sometimes lets the guilty go free and condemns the innocent. And we accept that. We call it the price of civilization. But the Vikings, they wouldn't accept it. They demanded certainty. They demanded that the gods themselves participate in justice. And they were willing to pay for that certainty in blood and burns and broken bodies. Was it better? Probably not. Was it fair? By our standards, absolutely not. But it was real. It meant something. And the people who lived under it, they believed that truth would prevail, that innocence would be rewarded, that the gods were watching, and that belief, that gave them strength to endure ordeals that would destroy us, strength to face accusations without lawyers or appeals, strength to accept judgment and move forward. So maybe the real question isn't whether these rituals were right or wrong. Maybe the question is, what are we willing to endure for truth? What price would we pay to know with absolute certainty that justice had been done? Would we reach for the burning iron? Would we plunge our hands into boiling water? Would we sink into freezing darkness and trust that we'd be pulled out? Or would we choose the comfortable uncertainty of modern justice, the endless appeals, the procedural delays, the possibility that truth might never be known? I'm not saying we should bring back trial by ordeal, but I am saying we've lost something. We've lost the willingness to sacrifice for certainty, to endure pain for truth, to let something greater than ourselves decide our fate. And maybe, just maybe, that loss has cost us more than we realize. The shield maidens understood this. They lived it. They faced ordeals that would break most of us, and they did it not because they were superhuman, but because they believed in something bigger than themselves. They believed in honor, in truth, in the gods, in the community, and that belief. That made them capable of anything, so I'll leave you with this. Imagine you're standing in that longhouse. The fire crackles, the iron glows, every eye is on you, and you have a choice. Reach for the iron and prove your innocence through pain, or refuse and live forever marked as guilty. What would you choose? Would you have the strength to endure? Would you trust the gods to judge you fairly? Would you believe that truth was worth any price? Or would fear win? Think about it, really think about it, because the answer tells you something about yourself, something important, something true, and in the end, truth is all that matters, just like it mattered to the Shield-Maidens, just like it mattered in the longhouses of the North, just like it should matter now. So tell me, which ordeal terrifies you most? The burning iron, the boiling water, the freezing depths, and more importantly, do you think you would survive?